Today, we will talk about Tauva, the Tau god born from the collective consciousness of those who believe in the greater good, a young but already very powerful deity. Take out your tablets and get ready to take notes on our lecture about Tauva. The goddess Tauva embodies the concept of the greater good, which translates into the Tao language literally as Tauva and sounds. This all-encompassing ideology is the principle of Tao society, which is based on a caste system and the collective advancement of all who are part of Tao society towards a brighter future. The idea of the greater good is the goal and meaning of life for all races in the empire. The doctrine of the greater good is that there is a certain correct position of things in the universe which is best suited for its inhabitants, and that there should be no nonsense around it. Everyone should strive to achieve this position of things to the maximum. Friendship and cooperation are fundamental, the theme of the greater good. It was the greater good that helped unite the warring Tao in the dawn of their civilization. From ancient times, Tao first offer new Xenos civilizations to accept the greater good, and only then do they destroy them. And the civilizations of these empires are numerous, say the Demiurgs, the dog-like Torellians, the frog-like Galgs, Nikasars, Geatrix, and of course humans. As you know, the Tau race itself is not psychoactive, or rather it has very little psychoactivity. Their souls hardly reflect in the warp and are of little importance to most demons. So how did the goddess Tauva appear at all, if the Tau are not psychoactive, you might ask? Everything is very simple. In the Empire, there are many races that are very psychoactive and understand the greater good in their own way. The same people, or Gervesa, brought up in the classics of the Imperium and nurtured with faith in the Emperor God, consider the greater good as some kind of deity, and their psychoactivity makes it real. And the other races of the Empire join them, and now the Tau already have their own Chaos God in the army which protects them. What Tauva looks like? Her body resembles a human, and Tau with a large number of arms, which have different shapes. Some of them hold blades, some have huge claws like Kroots. On others there are needles, shells, shields, balls of flickering light. And all of them embody some race in the Empire. The goddess's face is devoid of features and resembles pale flesh. Perhaps because Tauva has not yet fully formed, it's not very clear how Tauva came to be. But her earliest appearance happened back in her youth. Commander Shadowsun, also known as Shas-O-Shasera, showed signs of greatness even in her childhood, while still training at the Firecast Academy. She was recognized as one of the most capable strategists, and she was noticed by the legendary Commander Puritide, who observed her at a very young age. Shadowsun became his youngest protege. She excelled in all trials, but during one of the training sessions, Puritide instructed her to find a stone he had placed in an underground labyrinth beneath Mount Kanzi on the Dalith Sept. The trial had a twist. Water began to flood the labyrinth during the search for the stone. This happened before Shadowsun could find the stone. Puritide was to blame for everything, setting up such deadly traps for his students to test whether she could escape the labyrinth. And you know, Shadowsun didn't make it. She lost her bearings and began to lose consciousness as she started to drown. At that moment, described incidentally in the new book about Shadowsun, Tauva came to her deep beneath Mount Kanzi. Water filled her lungs, causing her to lose consciousness. She felt like a raindrop falling into the mouth of a giant, invisible crocodile. Each surge was deadly, and each turn was a blow, wrenching her soul from her, disorienting her and making her freeze in fear. She struck something sharp, cutting her skin. Around her, a thick ink-like cloud of blood swirled in the dark water. Moments later, her last illusions of hope were swept away by the unrestrained force of the flood. Her fingers went completely numb and lost sensation. The caves were overflowing. The anger of the melting river reached its climax. There was no help to wait for. There would be no reprieve. Darkness came after her, but within it there was light. Semi-transparent figures with unnaturally large numbers of arms, impervious to the blows of icy water, drifted as calmly as a Dalithian jellyfish. The creature had an entire arsenal of weapons, blades, armors and shields. It floated very close, Its empty mask of a face somehow held inches from hers, although the deadly river constantly pushed her through the darkness. "No, what are you?" Her thoughts were so loud that she could swear she heard them. The creature lifted an amphora, from the mouth of which silver bubbles flowed, and brought it to her lips, not water but air, graceful, life-giving. Greedily, like a newborn baby, she filled her lungs. "I am everything," said the entity. Its voice was soothingly reminiscent of a mother's voice, yet carried a hint of threat. "I am fate. You're a ghost," Shadow Sun replied. "Just a ghost. Compared to the cosmos, I am nothing." "That is true," the apparition replied, "although even a seed cast upon the wind can sprout if you allow the children of hope." They passed through the dark expanse of non-existence. Moments later, the water became calmer. She could see the glow of cave worms again. Their flickering illuminated the ethereal spirit hovering before her. "How can I repay you?" she asked. "I just want to exist, child," the entity replied. Shadow Sun's head broke the surface of the underwater river, and at that moment the creature vanished. Tauva saved Shadow Sun in her youth by giving her an oxygen amphora, and she remembered that all her life. But later, of course, she forgot, especially by the beginning of the 5th sphere of expansion. Tau has this thing. They put their coolest commanders into stasis and bring them out when they are most needed by the Empire. And Tau also have so-called spheres of expansion, when the Empire gathers a ton of ships and troops. With each sphere of expansion, strange events periodically occur. But the 4th sphere of expansion broke all records. It was originally organized when the Earth-caste scientist Kabuto combined the engines of battlespheres with those of Kroot vessels and ships of the Imperium, ultimately creating Module AL-38, known as the Streamlined Flow. It was an experimental device based on Imperial transportation technology. When the module was installed on a ship, it created a bubble of antimatter and propelled it at a speed capable of piercing the fabric of reality. The initial tests were successful, allowing ships to traverse the entire Tau Empire in a matter of days instead of months, as it had been before. As a result, orders were given to create as many of these modules as possible and install them on the huge fleet of the 4th sphere. One might think someone would notice, "Guys, we've never tested so many engines simultaneously before. Maybe we should avoid this." But the Tau Empire didn't care. They were determined in the year 999 of the 41st millennium, a massive Tau fleet assembled to begin the 4th spherical expansion. And what happened? All the ships of the fleet simultaneously launched AL-38 modules, creating numerous rifts in reality that opened a huge wound, and the ships entered the warp. But along the way, they were attacked by terrifying demons of all kinds and began to destroy the ships. The Tau Empire decided it was a disaster and promptly forgot about them. However, the surviving Tau was saved by a warp entity, multi-armed and blue, which ejected them onto the territory of the Imperium known as Chalnath, establishing a connection with the rift of the Tau Empire. This breach came to be known as the Startide Nexus. After these events, Module AL-38 was removed from the ships and dismantled, but the Earth-caste continued to improve the device to reinstall it on Tau ships in the future. Commander Surestrike didn't understand where they had been thrown out of the warp. It turned out to be the Chalnath system. They began to colonize the nearest worlds, turning them into real fortresses. And after 10 years, the Tau decided to send a drone into the breach of the Startide Nexus. And it turned out that some Tau survived on the other side. Here, they organized the 5th sphere of expansion under Shadow Sun's leadership. The fleet was divided into 8 mini-fleets and sent to Chalnath. By the way, the ships also used AL-38 modules, but they were significantly modified. Upon reaching the survivors at Nemyar Atoll and docking with the massive arcology, Shadow Sun met with the commander, Surestrike, and was simply stunned by what was happening. The Tau from the 4th sphere of expansion believed that demons attacked them in the warp because of other races within the fleet. They argued that these races didn't believe in the greater good but turned it into a religion. Hence, a new god, in its embryonic stage named Tauva, appeared in the warp, and the only way to get rid of it was by killing non-Tau. How did they come to this conclusion? After the miraculous rescue in the warp by the new Chaos entity, most Xenos began to worship it as a god. And the Tau were like, is this some kind of joke? He definitely appeared because of you. As a result, the fourth sphere of expansion annihilated all Xenos within the Tau Empire and survived solely by their own means. Since then, the survivors from the fourth sphere of expansion within the Tau Empire have been considered xenophobic. They show cruelty towards races long integrated into the Empire. Commanders from the fourth sphere had to be ritually punished, and after the Kroot uprising in the Kisan colony, all surviving Xenos from the fourth sphere were segregated. Agreed, the situation was quite dire. But the fifth sphere of expansion needed to continue, and Shadow Sun established 3 new septa on Chalnoth immediately: Fesan, Kortal, and Yovai. Additionally, the Tau discovered a new race to be brought into the greater good. These are sentient fungal creatures that communicate with bursts of ultraviolet light in various shades. But why are these fungi valuable to the Tau? Well, the bursts of ultraviolet light mesmerize living beings and suppress their will. A very useful function for followers of the greater good, wouldn't you say? With the arrival of the fifth sphere of expansion, the persecution of Xenos ceased, and they began to build temples dedicated to the goddess Ta'alva on the new scepters, whom many began to see in their dreams. In short, everything was more or less fine, and it would have continued that way if not for the massive fleet of the Death Guard under the command of Lord Glurtosk, which appeared in Nemya Atoll and was heading towards the Nexus Rift. The Chaos Forces loved various warp rifts and wanted to dive into them to end up in the heart of the Tau Empire. The attack of the Nurgle's forces was indeed sudden and brutal, but Shadow Sun was also not a pushover and ordered the troops to destroy the ships. However, they did not falter and directed diseases towards them, which began to infect the Tau on an industrial scale, leading to some commanders blowing themselves up with the ships and stations to prevent spreading the contagion. Additionally, Shadow Sun sent a drone into the rift with a warning that a real Death Guard horde was heading their way. During the battle at its peak, Shadow Sun saw one of the temples of the goddess with a statue of Ta'alva. Looking at it, she remembered the creature from her youth that saved her from death. In anger, she destroyed the statue and ordered the Earthcast to destroy all temples of the goddess they found. Later, Shadow Sun decided to lead an attack on the Glurtosk and asked for prayers for her victory over the Death Guard to the Ta'alva goddess. Auxiliary Tau forces began to do so. Shadow Sun hoped to disable or destroy the ship before it entered the Nexus. The auxiliary forces joined her during the boarding, and she saw them chanting to Ta'alva and invoking the power of the goddess. "Ta'alva, protect us! Ta'alva, hear our prayer!" Somehow these words held back the decay. A bubble of clean air formed around the Tau soldiers. The larvae and flies recoiled from Shadow Sun's troops, and Nurgle's rot retreated. Despite their bravery, the Tau Death Guard managed to escape into the Nexus, consisting of only a few ships and Lord Death Guard's flagship, while the others began to retreat. Here's the clarification. Nurgle's followers are no fools either. Their local sorcerer received a vision indicating that the Death Guard would fall into a trap. Upon entering the Nexus, Glurtosk appeared obtuse, and he didn't believe his own sorcerer. However, a significant portion of the Death Guard forces did believe him, leading to a split within the Nurgle fleet. Most of the fleet followed the sorcerer's ship, while a small fleet, including the flagship, entered the Nexus and encountered Ta'alva. On the other side of the rift, the Nurgle forces never emerged. Lord Glurtosk's head was splitting open. As he grimly peered through the meters-thick glass of the flagship, there was nothing outside but the whirlpool and flickering lights. Initially, he found it somewhat beautiful, but now the glow irritated him, especially in combination with the blinding, soul-eroding headache. It left him in the most disgusting state. As it turned out, the wormhole was no different from the tides of the Empire, so familiar to him after millennia of travel. The feeling of triumph he felt upon entering the Tau's wormhole portal had almost dissipated. It had been so long since they arrived here. Wasn't traveling through wormholes supposed to be almost fleeting? It was difficult for him to recall exactly what Turglane had said before setting off with his ship into deep space. The sense of time had left him, all sense, Forward movement had ceased. "Bridgeman Vauntos!" he shouted. "Is this not space in which we find ourselves? Are we making any progress through it at all?" He had a vague sense that he had asked this question before, and that each time he did, the question hung in the air a little longer. "Technically," said the Death Guard helmsman through the grill of his helmet, its sharp, needle-like fangs framing it. "Technically, Lord Glurtosk." He squinted and gripped his scythe as his anger flared. "Perhaps it's worth clarifying?" He gestured to two decaying corpses lying on the grill beneath their feet. Their exposed entrails oozed with stench. "Or have you joined Vulpex and Obidiak in happy retirement?" "Our progress through this space is slowing, my lord, as if something is resisting us or holding us back. Another major loss of momentum and we'll be—" "Don't say it," Glurtosk said. "Don't speak it, Helm." Nevertheless, the chilling thought blossomed in his mind like a corpse flower. Quietly, Glurtosk and his legion had become lost in the empires about 10,000 years ago. It had driven them to the brink of madness, and they found themselves at the mercy of the most abominable of all cosmic forces, stuck deep in the currents of the warp, forced to endure slow entropic decay, knowing that their entire existence was meaningless. For the Death Guard, it was far worse than death in battle. It was a nightmare turned reality, the worst of all possible scenarios. His attention was drawn to a shattered fragment of glass. Glurtosk picked it up, peering at the warp through the murky glass. There was something there, in the whirlpools, a colossal creature that resembled both Tau and human, but with too many arms. Some had 5 fingers, others 4, like Tau or the talons of Kroot. Most arms wielded blades, others horns of plenty, spears and shimmering discs of light. Where its face should have been, there was nothing at all, just an empty mask of pale flesh. "What are you?" Glurtosk asked. The phrase, born of his bewildered mind, pierced him like lightning. "I am the goddess Tauva." "No!" Glurtosk yelled. "These Tau are godless, but their allies, no!" The creature drew closer, enveloping with its claws, now as long as a battleship. Lord Glurtosk dropped the shard of glass and screamed until his mind shattered into pieces. "So, we have a new young chaos goddess who is still growing but has already made herself known. And faith in her is growing not by the days, but by the hours. Currently, the Tau have only 2 paths: either ignore Tauva and begin to rid the Empire of all races, or fully embrace the greater good. But we must not forget about the ethereals, who consider Tauva paramount and worship it as gods. The goddess herself wishes only good for her children. At least no nuances have been noticed behind her so far, and perhaps soon a civil war will begin in the ranks of the Empire, or the Tau will become even stronger than before. But from all the information we have, the ethereals will never allow the emergence of a new Xenos god.